It is Birds 365, our last summer Thursday of the show. Next week, we're actually talking about Eagles doing things on the field. We're going to talk on the field and off the field with our first guest. Always good when we got John Stolnis from Bleeding Green Nation, hosted the Eye on the Enemy podcast. And he looks like he's ready to go out and play the back nine at Royal Liverpool with that hat on.
Yeah, there we go.
Get out and shoot a
Somebody
couple
was
under
asking
par.
for your British Open picks, Jody, so you got to throw them out there. But yeah, maybe John's the pick.
Yeah, he's our
Man,
pick.
you don't want me out there. You don't want any part of that. I don't think I've in all the golf I've played, if I've ever strung together 3 decent shots in a row, I'll need to be reminded of it because
Nice.
I don't think it's ever happened.
I'm with you, John. I get one. If I get a good drive, I consider it successful. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I hit the ball well, that's it. My short game, forget about it.
Been there, done that, stop that. Don't even bother anymore. Gave it a shot for too many years and said, no, you got to stop playing this stupid game. Still enjoy watching it. I got it on in the background, but you look like you're ready to go out and play a couple holes. But we're glad you're hanging with us here today. Dennis Kelly, John with tongue implanted in cheek, said, righting the wrong of a previous trade, his second trip through Philadelphia. He gonna make this squad? He gonna actually play for the Eagles, or is he purely just a safety net?
Well, I think he is probably one of the backups if there's an injury. I think he kind of slides into the Andre Dillard role, right? I mean, he's going to be a guy who is not going to start. He's not going to. Hopefully, you don't see him this year.
No,
but
yeah, hopefully.
I mean, that's the goal, right? But I mean, if somebody gets hurt, I think he's shown as a veteran who has been able to stick in the league for 11 years or something like that. He's
it's pretty impressive.
It's really what an amazing thing. And I know when that trade happened, we kind of laughed at the Titans for making that deal. And at the end of the day, they really won that trade. And so nice job by him to kind of have the career that he's had and to plug away. 11-year career. Not many guys do that in the NFL. So yeah, I think he'll make the team. I think he'll be kind of a backup piece and an insurance policy and a half decent one. I think it makes you feel a little bit better about the offensive line, the depth on the offensive line that certainly took a hit when Andre Dillard left.
Yeah, what was your favorite moment of the Dorial Green Beckham era?
When he left.
I joked about it with Jody, though. And I said this recently with Ryan Bates, who's turned into a starting guard with the Buffalo Bills. The Eagles traded him for Eli Harold, which was even a smaller time frame than Dorial Green Beckham. And everyone, well, they lost that trade. I don't look at it that way. I still think that DGB trade made sense from a perspective of Dennis wasn't going to make the team that year.
Yeah.
Ryan Bates wasn't going to make the team. So you take a flyer on somebody else, it doesn't work out. And then they end up going, in the case of Ryan, as I said, he's turned into a starter in Buffalo. But he wouldn't be a starter here. I guarantee you that. And in the case of Dennis Kelly, as you mentioned, John, 12 years. But for this team, what it tells me is they're not competent. You mentioned Andre Dillard. You couldn't keep him. We all know that. But they were very comfortable with Andre Dillard as a backup left tackle. They are not comfortable with what they have at backup left tackle. That's what it tells me.
No, and I think that's true. I mean, sure, you want to give yourself as much depth as you possibly can, but I mean, Brett Toth, when he seemed, I don't know enough about the ins and outs of offensive line play to tell you whether or not Dennis Kelly is a better option than Brett Toth or whoever else that may be fighting for a backup tackle job in training camp. And I think if they're adding a guy like this, that Jeff Stoutland, if he probably feels like he needs another veteran in the mix, just as like you said, a safety net, a security blanket. It's possible Toth comes out in training camp and or whoever else, maybe somebody else emerges in training camp and really shows Stoutland and the rest of the Eagles coaching staff something, and they decide to go in that direction, and they dismiss. They dismiss Kelly, and he decides to go someplace else. But it at least gives them some level of, like you said, security, some level of comfort that they have a veteran who can play at this level. He's not a starter anymore. Even when he was a starter, he was never an elite level offensive lineman, but he's a capable veteran backup offensive tackle who can play left guard. You cover your bases. And at this point in the summer, you're not making any major trades. You're not signing any major free agents. This is the kind of move that Howie Roseman, I think he's just itching to make a move too, right? Howie Roseman has been inactive for a few weeks. He just wanted to make some phone calls and get something done.
And he did. Dennis Kelly back here to South Philadelphia. All right, John, we probably discussed this before, and if it's somewhat repetitious, I apologize, but maybe I can put a little bit of a different slant on it. Two new coordinators here in Philadelphia, offensive and defense. The Eagles got perched by their two top guys as coordinators last year. And Sean Desai comes in from outside. Brian Johnson gets elevated from within the organization. They will be under a microscope this year because they're replacing, despite what some people might want to say about the former defense coordinator. He put up numbers when he was here. The Eagles defense was pretty damn good on the statistical bent last year. This year come in with their two new OCs. Do you care how they go about their job? And here's what I mean by that. There's going to be activities at the NovaCare complex as of Thursday. I don't know if I'll call it practice. You actually have to have 22 guys on the field for me to call it practice. Don't know how much they're going to do of that, but hands-on, out there, letting the players know, working with them, and maybe even trying to show them something. Some of these guys are not quite exactly what you're going to be looking at as far as duplicating moves that they're doing and or their placement during the games. Some coordinators like to be down on the field. Some like to be up in the box. What are we looking at from Sean Desai and Brian Johnson? How do you think each will handle their business? I'm not even talking about what the results are going to be after the fact. We'll judge the crap for that. But before it even gets started, and
I like the idea of the coordinators being on the field. Now, I mean, if the play caller, if Brian Johnson wants to get a literal 30,000 foot view of the field, and so he can kind of see what's happening, then that's fine. I think every coaching staff is going to. It's really what I guess what Nick Sirianni is comfortable with, whether he wants to have his guys right there on the sideline with him or whether he's comfortable being on the headset. I think that whatever they decide to do, and I don't know if Desai is going to be, I think most defensive coordinators are on the sideline. Most offensive coordinators, I think, are on the sidelines now. But if they both decide to be up in the booth, Nick Sirianni, if that's what he wants, I think the Eagles and their coaching staff deserves the benefit of the doubt. After they've taken a lot of criticism these last couple of years for the type of training camps that they've run, not enough hitting, not enough time in preseason games. And I think we have seen that a lot of those criticisms probably should be put on the shelf for a while because of how healthy they were last year and how good they played last year. They came into the season ready to play. And so whatever they do with these, with training camp starts, with these limited practices or training sessions or whatever it is we want to call them, they've earned the grace of trying some things out and doing whatever it is that they feel like it fits each of their personalities and their workflows best. But I think that's a fair thing to ask. Like, what is their workflow going to be? I'm a big workflow guy in my job, in my personal life. I'm not successful and productive until I have figured out a successful workflow. I've figured out successful workarounds and shortcuts. And I think that's the challenge for Brian Johnson and for Sean Desai right now with the coaches they have, with Nick Sirianni, with the players. What are the players used to? What makes them comfortable? That's all going to get worked out over the next few weeks. That's what the summer's for. That's what training camp's for. So I have high confidence that they will figure it out.
John, I want you to put on, you already have your Eagles hat
on. I'll get a different hat on if you want.
I want you to put on your Eagles player cap. And if I tell you, hey, what's your least favorite thing about Philadelphia? You're probably not going to say the people.
The fans,
no. Did the Eagles dodge a bullet by, I wouldn't say they screwed it up, but they gave what they felt was a fair market offer for CJ Gardner-Johnson. I think the market answered by saying they did give a fair offer because he took less ultimately to go to Detroit. Was a very productive player, was a very good player, playmaker, splashy player. Obviously, Eagles fans loved him when he was on the field, but did they dodge a bullet? This guy just shoots himself in the foot a lot.
Yeah, CJ strikes me as one of those guys when if he feels like he's being paid well and he's being properly compensated, and that when the situation is ideal for him, he's going to be fine. And you probably don't need to worry about him. Although, like I said, I think you guys mentioned it right before I came on. There seemed to be some structures in place, some people in place that kind of helped keep him in line, that tamp down those issues with speaking when he shouldn't speak and saying things he shouldn't say. So you do wonder, like, if he gets the big payday, does he suddenly feel freer to express himself and to voice frustration, especially with the new coaching staff coming in? So I think it's fair to ask. I think it's a fair question to raise as to whether or not the Eagles dodged a bullet here. Talent-wise, I would certainly still love to have him on the field because I don't think that they have answered the issues at safety coming into the season here. And I still think there's probably a move out there that they're going to make before the start of training camp. But that being said, what an idiot. I mean, what are you doing, man? I mean, he doesn't have to worry about placating Philadelphia fans anymore.
No.
And he's one of those guys that I think would probably, if the Lions do come into Philadelphia at some point in the playoffs this year, would be energized by the fans booing him and would play it up. We know that he's an antagonistic player on the field. He likes to engage with other players and get other players off their game and to get them unfocused. And he seems to me to be a guy who enjoys chaos, right? He's an agent of chaos on the field, and it certainly seems like off the field as well. So I think from a headache standpoint, the Eagles coaching staff is not shedding any tears over having to worry about CJ and placating him. But I do still think that they need to figure out that position. And it would have been great to be able to put him in a position here, if he was here, to pay him what he felt like he was worth. He'd be on a winning team. My guess is that we wouldn't have heard him say what he said if he was still a member of the Eagles. But you're clearly dealing with a temperamental guy, and those guys are always a coin flip.
With the safety position, everyone is, at least I shouldn't say everyone, but a lot of people are just penciling in Reed Blankenship as a starter, as a guy who's going to play well, as a guy who's going to I don't know that anyone is projecting him to be as big a playmaker, interceptors like as CJ, but not a big drop off from the safety position last year when he both filled in himself and as the starting safety this year. Is it a given he's going to start? And is it a given that he can play to the beyond the level that he played last year? Because you usually expect a player in his second year to be better than what you get out of him in his rookie season.
I don't think anything at the safety position is a given. I think at this moment, Reed Blankenship is the heavy favorite to start at free safety. But that's not to say that, Sidney Brown can't come in and as a rookie and surprise everybody and really show out in training camp and earn a starting spot. But I think he's going to have to play exceedingly well in order to knock Reed Blankenship out of the starting lineup. And even then, I think Blankenship would have to look really terrible in training camp in order to lose his starting spot. Now, if they go out and they add somebody, Budda Baker's still out there in the wind. That doesn't seem like
that would help.
It would really help.
Yeah.
And that would be the kind of move that would signal, when they were adding CJ last year right before training camp, it was like you could just feel that final puzzle piece being put into place. It's like, I don't really see a super obvious weakness on this team now. But with this team, you still see it at linebacker and at safety. So adding somebody like that, allowing Reed Blankenship maybe to move to, to have Budda Baker and Reed Blankenship together, or maybe you have Terrell Edmunds, and it just gives you another guy. So I think Reed Blankenship I do think he almost certainly starts this season as a starter. Something catastrophic would have to happen for him not to be the starter, or they would have to add somebody else and for other things to happen for him not to be there. Will he play? Will he improve?
Well, Johnny frees up.
It's going to be interesting to see what Sean Desai's defense is going to look like. I think he should.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Sorry, you froze up for a
Yeah.
second for us, but we got you back.
Oh, okay. All right.
Um, to further that, because I was thinking about CJ for obvious reasons yesterday, and it kind of popped into my head. So if you acquire somebody like Buda Baker, obviously problem fixed. It's
Mhm.
one of the best safeties in football. But if you have to stay in house, you have to stay status quo. I was thinking at the end of last season when Avante was hurt, you remember um, they CJ played safety, obviously. And then when they needed a nickel on the field, he played nickel and Reed would rotate in at safety. So I'm
Right.
starting to think, John, if and again, if this is status quo, if you're not comfortable with Terrell Edmonds, somebody, it could be Reed Blankenship, could Sidney Brown's not ready.
Mhm.
What do you think of doing that with Avante Maddox? For two reasons. One, he's on the field 100% of the snaps when he's
Yeah.
healthy instead of 75 if he's just playing slot. 100% of the slots. When you don't have it, in other words, when you don't have a slot corner on the field, he's still on the field playing safety. And then he moves down to the slot when you need the slot corner and you rotate in the best option,
Yeah.
whether it's Terrell Edmonds, whether it's Sidney Brown. And maybe that's a way to get Sidney Brown on the field early, but not with a ton on his plate.
Mm.
Just optionality again. I'm using too much Sam Hinkie. But
Yeah.
Avante's a really good player.
Mhm.
Now, people are going to say, but he's always hurt. Yeah, but you can't legislate injuries. I want him
Right.
on the field every play. The only way you get him on the field every play is if you sort of toggle like they did with
Yeah.
CJ.
No, I think that's fair, and I think what you have seen out of this Eagles defense, especially in the secondaries, they want to be flexible. They want to be a hybrid defense, right? They want to be able to move different guys in and out. And Avante Maddox can play safety in a pinch. You know, he can do it like you said. He can if there's just two receivers on the field, he can stay in there and he can he can make tackles and play that effectively. But I think obviously you want him as your slot guy, so he's probably going to play the majority there. And like you said, he gets injured, but you can't really you can't go into the season thinking, oh, we're only going to have him for 8 games. You go into the season thinking you're going to have him for the majority of the season, and like every player, there's that injury risk there. So I think they have some. I think they have some options. Can if it's a disaster at safety in training camp, would they move him to safety full time? Well, now you're talking about you need Zach McPherson to step in, or you need like somebody you signed in the offseason, like a Greedy Williams to step in. And I don't love those
But
options. So
that's why I'm saying, yeah, I don't love those options, but that's why I'm saying he's not full-time safety.
yeah,
He's just safety, in other words, to get on the field that
hmm
100%, to turn
yeah,
75 to 100%, but he's still playing the 75 at slot corner.
yeah,
But when you take the slot corner off the field, you're taking one of your best players off the field and
hmm
putting on, in my estimation, whoever it is, a lesser player.
yeah,
So why not? Why not? He's physical.
yeah.
I get the injury part of it, but I can't. I like the way they used, what I'm trying to say, I guess, is I like the way they used CJ at the end of last season
Yeah.
when they had to have a slot corner and Josiah Scott wasn't good enough and Avante was hurt. Yeah, why not have some moving chairs, so to speak?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, John, and I think to be able to do that, they do have those guys that can do that. You do run the risk of if Avante Maddox does miss time, then you've got to think of another plan. But you can at least start the season with that plan if you're not going to go out and get another safety here this offseason.
Yeah.
All right. As of next week, Johnny S., there will be some battle lines drawn. Are you waiting for the competition between Ian Book and Tanner McKee? I is one of the key things that's going to be decided in camp. Who's going to be that third string quarterback? Can Ian Book, can you slide him through to the practice squad? They still like to think of themselves as the quarterback factory. Well, they got a little experiment going this camp. Tanner McKee versus Ian Book. What are you looking to see there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the reports about Tanner McKee coming out of the draft was that he has a decent arm, right? I mean,
Yeah. Well, he ought
and
to. He's like 6'6", 240. Yeah.
he's a tree
Yeah.
back there. But I mean, sure, you want to always have those guys. It's like those high upside guys, those high ceiling guys, and the Eagles, they did a phenomenal job with Jalen Hurts, and a lot of that is Hurts, right? The legendary work ethic that Hurts has, but how he transformed himself into the star quarterback that he's become. Sure, you'd like to think that the coaching staff also had a lot to do with that. Brian Johnson, as the quarterbacks coach, certainly had a lot to do with that, and he's still there now. His role has changed, and so it's going to be up to the other coaches and him to kind of bring this guy along. But you don't have to do a whole lot with Jalen Hurts in training camp, right? I mean, you're hopefully not going to see him a whole lot in situations where he could get hurt, where there's going to be any kind of real contact. And it's really the same thing with Marcus Mariota. You just want Mariota to get familiar with the playbook and give the defense something similar to look at, so that they can be ready to go. So yeah, I think, and Ian Book's a guy who has had some promise, and I know coming over from the Saints, he was a guy that a lot of people thought could at least be a backup quarterback in the league. I think it'll be a fun competition to see what these guys do, and I'm very intrigued by McKee. I love a big arm quarterback, and if they can, he's a statue back there, so he's if he gets protection and he's in the right offensive system, I think he could be a good backup quarterback. But there's a lot of ifs there, and I think it'll be fun to watch these guys throw.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think the Eagles ultimately are going to default to Tanner McKee because they drafted him. If he doesn't show up and play like Carson Strong or Clayton Thorson, I mean, if he plays himself out of the position. Although I will say, Nick Sirianni, for those who don't know, is really close to Tommy Rees, who is the current Alabama offensive coordinator, but was Ian Book's offensive coordinator at Notre Dame and also longtime starter at Notre Dame. And he trusts Tommy Rees, which is a lot of the reason why Ian Book is here, because he raved about him so much. But so I do think Ian's got a better chance than people realize. But did you watch, John? Have you watched Peyton Manning's Quarterback on Netflix? And I want to get your thoughts on Marcus if you have. If you haven't, I'll just make it more general. Is he really an upgrade over Gardner Minshew? Or do people look at, this was the second pick in the draft? Because he did not look great at times in Atlanta last year, especially when it came to getting the football down the field. Really bad numbers. Is that just people saying, well, he's got to be better because he was the number 2 overall pick back in the day?
Yeah, there's also a lot of I think residual Chip Kelly era. We got to get Marcus Mariota somehow, right? I mean, there's still some of that that the fan base may have. I haven't seen the Netflix show, so I can't really speak to what we've seen on Netflix. But you're right, the issues with him throwing the ball deep down the field, that's been talked about before. We've kind of known that was an issue with him. What he does bring you is somebody with a similar skill set to Jalen Hurts, that you can basically run most of the same stuff. Now, you may not be able to hit that deep ball to Devontae or to AJ Brown, although Nick Sirianni will dial them up, whether or not he's successful in doing it, whether or not it's his strength. I think Nick will still dial them up. And I think that, Mariota has 2 better wide receivers here in Philadelphia to make a play on the ball if he does decide to chuck it deep. But at the same time, I think that what Mariota gives you, I don't know that he's necessarily better than Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew, I think, really was done in by a horrific game against the Saints.
Yeah.
Prior to that, most of us believe that Gardner Minshew was a pretty darn good backup quarterback. He had those two of the bad interceptions against the Cowboys. I only threw 3 picks. I think 2 of them were really, really bad interceptions that he threw. Outside of that, he played very well in that game. It was really that Saints game where he came and looked totally ineffectual. Everybody said we got to move on. This guy can't be a backup quarterback for a Super Bowl contending team. The entire fan base lost confidence, and I get it. I lost confidence in him too. I think Marcus Mariota is a better fit for the type of offense that the Eagles want to run, but it's fair to wonder if they truly are better at backup quarterback. It's different, which might fit what this team wants to do better, but I don't know that he's necessarily a better quarterback than Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, I vote for different is better. I wasn't as big a Gardner fan as some of the guys here in town. Not that I think Mariota's going to be great. Jalen Hurts goes out and you can't see the difference. Oh, yeah, you'll see the difference because not too many people are Jalen Hurts. But, yeah, he's replacing Gardner Minshew. It's not like Gardner Minshew came in here and you said the same thing about him. Oh, no difference with the starter. Hopefully it's not a non-issue that Jalen plays a whole bunch of games, if not all 17 this year. I need your take on a specific Eagle player because he's one that we get varying opinions on, and this one I'm not in the positive camp as some are. How is Kenny Gainwell fit into this quarterback, this running back rotation? It seems like the Eagles are going to run. We're all speculating on it, and none of us really know. Rashad Penny, never been here before. DeAndre Swift, never been here before. So we're dealing with some new fits and some unknowns. How does Kenny Gainwell's role shake out for the Eagles this year? And give me a good, bad, or indifferent on it, the way you think it plays.
Yeah, it's really interesting. He didn't have much of an impact for most of last year, and then late in the season and in the playoffs, he looked like a different runner. He looked like a stronger runner up the middle. He looked like a more determined runner. He broke more tackles, and he looked pretty good. That's a very small sample size, and he's also working with other running backs who have small sample sizes, maybe slightly larger. Rashad Penny has had more success in the NFL, but has had trouble staying on the field. And so with DeAndre Swift, again, had a big game against the Eagles last year. He's had some big games, but he's kind of, in a lot of ways, a Miles Sanders-like, in that he's kind of a home run hitter, but leaves a lot of meat on the bone, out of the backfield. So I think with Kenny Gainwell, I think he will start getting the bulk of the or more of the carries than the other two guys. I don't know but that'll hold true by the end of the season. I think if Rashad Penny's workload is what we think it's going to be, which is like 10, 12 carries a game, something like that, maybe not quite, maybe 8 to 10 carries a game, he can stay healthy throughout the regular season, and he can keep that yards per carry number up over 5, which has been the norm for his career. I think Kenny Gainwell is probably, I don't know, do you think he's their best receiver out of the backfield? I think he has shown an ability to be a good receiver out of the backfield, but the Eagles don't throw to the running backs all that much, except in the screen game.
I talk about it all the time, John. They just don't throw it. I think he's a really good receiver, but I can't say he's a better receiver than DeAndre Swift because DeAndre's done it.
Yeah.
But the Eagles don't throw the football to their backs. So I think people don't realize how good a receiver Kenny Gainwell is. So it's, they have two good receiving backs, but they're not going to throw them the ball anyway.
I think the Eagles are approaching the running backs as, let's see what happens. I really do. I don't think that any of these guys have a role spelled out for themselves. I think it's going to be a hot hand situation. Who's running the best? Who's seeing the holes better right now? I don't think you're certainly not going to have any of these guys be a bell cow. None of these guys are going to be a 15 to 20 carry a game guy every single week. But I think you'll probably see a situation where one guy gets 15 to 20 carries for a 2-3 week stretch, and then he's getting 4 carries a game for 3 or 4 games. And one of the other guys jump up. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what Kenny Gainwell's role is going to be, because I'm not so sure the Eagles coaching staff knows exactly what each running back's role is going to be just yet.
Yeah, and I wonder how comfortable Nick Sirianni was that. I always hear people talk about committees, but then you want somebody to lean on. So it is that's going to be one of the more interesting stories as Eagles camp moves on as we get closer to the regular season. Last one from me, John, at John Stolnis on Twitter. Make sure you follow John there is Eye on the Enemy podcast. Tremendous listen. The good fights. If you're a Phillies fan, the Eagles kind of hope the Phillies continue to make this push towards the playoffs. They like being on the back burner for as long as possible.
Yeah.
Because they know when they're going to be on the front burner. Kimberly Martin did a heck of a job filling in for Stephen A. Smith on ESPN because she said something outrageous, which is kind of Stephen's wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Kimberly said Jalen Hurts is the most disrespected player in the NFL. Buying it, selling it.
I don't know that he's the most disrespected player in the NFL. I think
everybody loves Jalen.
My sense, I mean, you've got the Chris Sims of the world who continually rank him like number 9 or number 10 among quarterbacks. And there are some other noisemakers out there who are nothing more than the type of thing you buy at the dollar store on New Year's Eve to bang around when the clock strikes midnight, right? That's their whole deal. And Chris Sims is one of them. There's a couple of guys who have access to grind with certain players. But generally speaking, I think most people believe Jalen Hurts is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. You may not think I probably would put him at number 2 based off of what he did last year, but the argument is certainly there that he would be 3, 4, 5, something in there. And I think all of the quarterback rankings that I've seen, with the exception again of the outliers like a Chris Sims, has him there. So I don't think that he's the most disrespected player in the league. I think everyone around the league loves the talent. You may have a few other analysts here and there who want to see another year of Jalen Hurts doing what he did this year before fully embracing it and getting in with that camp. And I respect that. I think that's fine. Jalen Hurts has played one elite season of football, but it was elite as elite can get. Yeah. And so I don't agree with that assessment. No, I think he's respected. And I do think, there are some folks out there who maybe are taking more of a wait and see approach, but appreciate and are rating correctly the type of season that he had last year.
Last one for me, also Jalen Hurts related. I'm very much in belief that he's going to have another super season, and it might even be better than last year, which is borderline tough to believe. We talk all the time about returning to the mean for the Eagles on defense and this, that. You could have that with Jalen too. So even though I'm as big a fan as you can get, here's my one concern. And just please, if I'm off base, tell me. And you'll put a smile on my face. Jody, you're friggin' wrong.
Okay.
Because of the season he had, because of the level that his game took him to, I think everybody's going to be reaching for a piece of Jalen Hurts this year. And I'm not talking about opposition on Sunday afternoons. I'm talking about endorsements. I'm talking about promotions. I'm talking about the obligation of not only QB1 of the Philadelphia Eagles, but one of the top quarterbacks in the National Football League. I was in the car 2 days ago listening to my boy Ike Reese saying, hey, Jalen Hurts was here at the station today, signing balls and taking meetings and whatever else. Because, WIP wants him to cut promos for them, too.
Yeah.
When you raise that star level, everybody needs a little piece of your time. And Jalen is not high maintenance like CJGJ. He's going to try and say yes. He's going to try and do the right thing. He's going to try and take care of the people who are important to either him or the organization in general. Could he get a little bit too thinly spread this year?
I think that's a certainly a reasonable concern. I think like a guy like Randall Cunningham back in the day, I think you saw a lot of the trappings of stardom sidetrack him.
The Randall Cunningham show.
Yeah,
Randall Cunningham.
And you're not going to see the Jalen Hurts show. I know they don't really we don't really have those types of shows anymore. I miss them, by the way. The Buddy Ryan show was one of the greatest half hours of television in American history. But I think that with Jalen Hurts, if there's one guy that I could say I think won't fall into that trap, it's a guy who is as mentally strong, as mentally tough, and as mentally disciplined as Jalen Hurts. One of the reasons that he became so good was the work ethic. And you're right, he didn't have as much time demanded of him last offseason and during the course of the year because he hadn't reached that star level status. So I think once it's time to get to work, Jalen Hurts is going to be all about the work. And I have very little worry that he will be able to separate all of the demands on his time, the interview requests, all the other things that go along with it. He's a guy that doesn't strike me as a guy who gets too high or too low. He's like a metronome. And he just keeps ticking and he keeps taking steps towards getting better and getting better. And the results may or may not be there the same way they were in 2022. He may be a better player and not have as good results this year. That happens sometimes in sports, but one thing I'm not worried about is him being able to compartmentalize the off-field stuff with the on-field stuff. And I think he's a guy who will say no to things. I think he'll do it respectfully. I think he knows how to be a person in the world, unlike a lot of athletes when they achieve star level status. And I'm not concerned about that with Jalen. I think he's grounded and he's surrounded himself with good people. And I think if there are more demands on his time, he will filter it in an effective way. I have a lot of confidence in him that way.
And I surely hope you are right, because the Eagles need him to be that same superstar level quarterback if they're going to achieve what they want to achieve, which is a return trip to the Super Bowl.
And by the way, I missed those shows too, guys.
Yeah.
Those, everybody had a coach's show around the NFL. Those things don't exist anymore. I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah, these guys are soft today, man.
Listen, Channel 3, Channel 6, Channel 10, get on it. Get a
well,
show
I don't think
together.
they can. I mean, they don't want to do it. Nobody wants to do anything,
right?
Because
Cowards.
they're all CIA state secrets.
They had to wait.
They
had to wait 10 days before the season started, before the Jets got Hard Knocks jammed down their throats.
Yeah,
you don't understand. This is high spy stuff. The NFL thinks that, if we don't let them know what's going on, what a competitive advantage we're going to have. You think Nick Sirianni's going to do a coaching show, Mr. Competitive Advantage? Won't answer a question about what he may do in an upcoming week because he wants a competitive? No chance, no shot. Don't hold your breath, boys. Not coming back. Not in this town. Not with Nick Sirianni.
See, I think a Sirianni show could be high theater. I mean, maybe you don't even ask him about the game. Just let the man cook. You know what I mean? He's entertaining. I think that would be a phenomenal half hour of television. But you're right, it's never going to happen.
They'd have to get a bunch of desks though, because he keeps slamming it and breaking them. With the
Zero chance of happening. The Eagles, and I think Sirianni buys into it too. I don't think that's one where he comes from a directive from the organization. I do think he thinks that if he can keep things under wraps, he can get a competitive advantage on Sunday, and he way overstates it. Johnny Stolnis, always great. Whenever you come on, thank you very much for doing so. Yes, we'll actually be talking about Eagle stuff on the field the next time you join us. Thanks for doing it today.
Anytime, guys. Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Bleeding Green Nation and the Eye on the Enemy podcast for you Eagle podcast fans. His one is a good one. All right, McMullen and McDonald coming back. Oh, I got a question for my partner, Johnny Mack. Every once in a while, McMullen and McDonald disagree on something, and some people like when we disagree.
Some people like it.
Yeah. We got one I think we're going to disagree on when we come back. Judging trades. Howie Roseman didn't make a trade. He made a signing yesterday, but he signed a guy that he traded once before. I want to talk about how you judge trades in the National Football League with John McMullen next here on Birds 365.